So the first thing you have to do is you have to take everything you think about a duck because it's a poultry that you're assigning to the world of chicken and just get rid of it. You would never see me recommend to cook a rare piece of chicken. It's just, not only is it has some significant, especially from chicken that is, from our regular distribution system, significant chance of illness, but it just wouldn't be very appetizing. Certain meats do need to be fully cooked, and chicken and some other poultry definitely is up there. It just is not pleasant. Duck is like beef, and you need to cook it like beef, especially the breast. And you have to look at the breast as being like a beef cutlet or something like that, a very fine cut piece of beef. But it's got something that beef generally doesn't. It's got a much more luxurious fat, and it's got a skin. So what I'll do is I'll take my knife and I'll go down on the edge of the breast and then just take that breast cutlet off on both sides. And then I'll take my knife and I'll score the skin, 3 little hatch marks in the skin. You can go back and cross, do like a cross cut as well, but you don't really want to go all the way end to end, just like maybe 2/3 of the way from end of skin to end of skin, because you don't want it to peel back too much. That's why I do just 3 little ones, maybe even half the distance. It's just going to help the fat render. Get a cast iron or carbon steel skillet, put down just a little bit of peanut oil or another oil of your choice that can handle high temperatures if you don't like peanut oil or you're allergic to it. And then as soon as that pan really begins to warm up, it doesn't have to get screaming hot. You just get it a little bit warm so we're not putting ice cold duck down on there. Put that duck skin side down on that pan and cook it until it really begins to render the fat out of the duck skin. And you'll be able to tell. And that skin begins to crisp a little bit. When that happens, flip it over onto the non-skin side and cook it for about 2 minutes at the most on the non-skin side. This is like a medium temperature, not a really high temperature here, okay? And your oven should have been preheated to about 400 degrees. So you get 1 to 2 minutes on the non-skin side of the duck. Flip it back over on the skin. Take your skillet straight away into the oven. About 6 minutes, maybe 5. Maybe 4. Like, you have to figure out your oven and how long you really cook it and whatever. But when get it out, don't touch it. Take it out, set the skillet on the stovetop or on a trivet or something like that, and leave it alone for a couple of minutes. Take it out of the pan, set it on a cutting board. Let it sit another couple of minutes. Let the temperature inside it come down. It's like steak. You don't want to cut right into it. It is going to be rare. It's going to be pretty rare. And if you cut into it now, not only will you lose all the beautiful juices, but it may actually kind of bleed a little bit, and that's not very appetizing. The same thing happens with steaks. Give it a good 5 minutes or even more to come down to more like a room temperature. Then slice it on the bias, and it is fantastic. Take the grease drippings from the pan and save them somewhere. They can be used with what we're going to talk about next, which is called a confit. All right? That's your breast. Salt and pepper is the only seasoning you need on it. It is fantastic. I will tell you that older birds tend to have tougher breast meat, and it's not as good if you have like a cull drake that's 2 years old. It's going to be somewhat tough, and then you may want to do some sort of a slow cook type thing, like a duck pot pie or something like that. But a young duck, this is what you do. The thighs and the leg. Take those off as a leg quarter. So take your knife and go right in at the ball joint where the thigh meets the main breast of the bird. Cut through there and just take that whole leg, thigh unit off. You can take the wings off, just discard, well, put the tip into the scrap pile. Don't discard it. But don't bother cooking the wing tip of a duck. And you won't get much off a wing, so I generally set the wings aside as well. But you could confit the wings with the legs. It'll work. What we're going to do, we're going to put some salt and pepper and some orange peel, a little bit of sage, thyme, and rosemary. And we're going to rub down these legs with that. And we're going to put that in the refrigerator overnight. We want a small crock because you want to completely cover this with fat. If you have it, because you cook a lot of duck or something, or because you can buy it from some specialty stores. You can buy it from a website called D'Artagnan. The best thing to use, traditional, duck fat. It's like the duck is its own little cooking kit, right? But whatever you use, you can take the duck fat that you've rendered off from the breast and add it to that fat. And you should. And you can save that fat and use it over and over and over again. I have used peanut oil. I have used plain old lard for this. I have used butter. The one I liked the least was butter. I felt that for some reason everything came out much saltier. And of course, salted butter obviously is salted, but it seemed, I don't know what it was, but butter was my least favorite thing to confit with. Pure duck fat is my favorite. And you can just look up a recipe for this, but basically you're gonna cover the duck in its own fat or whatever fat you have. You're gonna put it in the oven at a low temperature and you're gonna cook it for a couple hours. And when I say low temperature, I'm talking like 220 degrees. It is a luxury. It is, duck confit is served at some of the finest restaurants. And really what a cool thing to do is when you're done cooking it, bring it out, let it begin to cool a little bit so it sets some, but don't let the fat completely like gel on you. Because if you try to take it out when it's hot, it's going to fall apart. So let it come down in temperature to, like 150 degree range. And take it out and set it on a cutting board and let it, again, continue to cool. And then right before you serve it, just drizzle a little fat into the pan and crisp the skin right at the end, right before you serve it. And you'll those two things, and you'll never cook a duck any other way ever again when it comes to the breast and the legs and thighs. Once you try those two things, you'll be hooked, which is nice because one duck, 2 pieces of breast meat, meal for 2. One duck, 2 leg quarters, meal for 2. Now what do we do with the rest? If you want to, and if the duck has enough fat, or if you have multiple ducks where this will be worth it, take all of the skin off whatever's remaining of the duck. And sometimes you'll find like fatty deposits inside the duck. Anything you can get, the tail, the wing tips, all of that stuff. Take all the skin, cut it up in little pieces, get a pot on the stove. Put about an inch of water, maybe a little less than an inch of water, 3/4 of an inch, depending on how much you have to work with and how big the pot is. Bring that to a simmer and put your duck skin in there. What's going to happen is it's going to start rendering the fat out of the duck skin. And eventually you're going to boil all the water off. This is a real slow simmer, not a fat. You're going to burn it if you do it hot and fast. So a nice slow simmer where the water is just barely boiling, and all of a sudden you'll start to see it go to it almost looks like butter. It's just a beautiful fat coming out of the skin. And you just slowly simmer those in their own fat until they become little cracklings. And then you separate those off and don't throw those away. Those are the best little cracklings. They're so fantastic on a salad. They never make it that far with me. I just eat them. And then you can put that fat in your fat collection jar. If you do this long enough, you'll end up with enough duck fat to be doing your confits with pure duck fat. And this is the French method of using a duck, like the French housewife method. All of this works together. Now, everything else that came, the core, the frame of that bird, the wings, all of that stuff. What do you do with those? You throw all those bones in the oven on like 400 degrees for like 20 minutes, just till they're brown. And then just make a bone stock with that like you normally would. However you make a bone stock. I know I'm going long on this because it is such a fantastic meat, and it's such a simple meat to use, and it seems complicated because we don't really eat a lot of duck in America. And what you end up with then is one duck gives you a fat yield, it gives you a confit dinner, it gives you a breast dinner, and it gives you a stock. And if you have a couple ducks, all those little pieces of duck, and just do a duck soup. It sounds like a thing that people make fun of, like they say when you screwed something up, you made duck soup. Duck soup, little parsley, little celery, a little carrot, a little fresh fennel, thyme and rosemary, and duck broth itself is just one of the most succulent, sweet forms of a broth or stock you could ever make. It is just beautiful, and it comes out. Once you skim whatever fat you have left, it comes out abundantly clear. And if you do what I have said, which is you go ahead and skin everything and use that skin to render fat, you'll find duck has almost no fat in the meat. So your stock will have almost no fat on it anyway. And it is sublime. Duck stock, those of you who have made it know what I'm talking about. So, long first one, but guys, go out, get a duck, give this a try. It will change the way you look at poultry in America. As far as the temperature, the United States government says you should cook duck to 170 degrees. And you know what? Screw them. Most restaurants, when they do a duck breast, cook it to between 135 and 140 degrees. There's no reason you can't do that. Yes, it is safe. Do not equate the duck with a chicken farm. It's not the same thing. If it was dangerous to cook duck to 135 to 140 degrees, then there would be dead people everywhere in America, because every high-end restaurant that makes duck breast, that's what they do. Every single one of them. And if you do it right, that skin's crispy too. All right.